because if you build a lot of very specific large static meshes, like a mesh that has 10 pillars in it that are positioned in the right place, you might not be able to instance it again. So this is where the advice is not clear cut. I guess it's a trade-off.
So would a good median be to work with something like a set of 5 pillars and then instance it twice?
Yeah, especially if by making a set of 5 pillars instead of 10, that lets you use it 3 or 4 times instead of just twice. Then yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the kind of thing where this makes a lot of sense is, if you have, like in a lot of video games where they're trying to do debris, they'll do a little pile of rocks, and then they'll rotate and scale that in several different ways to make it look different. But they won't do an entire field of rocks, if you like, as a single mesh. So it's like a little bit of a trade-off. They won't do a single rock, but they also won't do an entire level of rocks. It's a bit of a balancing act, but definitely it's worth keeping this in mind that a whole lot of individual meshes, adds cost.
Okay, cheers for the clarification on that, because that's something I was giving bad instruction on previously, because I always believed in instancing everything, especially when there was like a bar with beer bottles and beer glasses, and I said, no, you just want one bottle and you want one glass, and we just instance it with 30, 40 bottles is going to be obviously a hit.
Yeah, but of course it's better to have 30 or 40 instanced bottles than 30 or 40 individual meshes. So your advice isn't bad. We can, ratchet it up a notch by maybe creating a cluster of 4 or 5 bottles and instancing that several times.
Yeah, cool. Cheers, Arn.
Yeah, no problem. And keep in mind also, back on the beer bottle thing, you might be tempted to create a brown texture for the main part of the beer bottle, and then UV map on a separate texture for the label. Well, in one sense, that's a good idea. In another sense, that's an extra step in the rendering, so it's going to create a little bit of a frame rate hitch. So, of course, it's a balancing act, because when you create one single big texture, that means you're going to end up with more larger textures. But if you use multiple small textures, then you can end up using more, reducing your frame rates a little bit. So we're always having to play trade-offs. Nothing comes for free, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that at the end of this, everyone will have a better understanding of the factors that contribute. So anyway, on this rendering steps things, if you want to see how many rendering steps that are in the current view, you can use stat render for that. So if you bring up the console, you can try it right now if you like. If you hit the tilde key on your keyboard, at least that's what it is on the American keyboard, and type stat render, you'll see your screen will be just filled up with a whole lot of numbers. I'm going to do that right now so I can. And if you move your point of view around so that it's against a black surface, if you look in the static mesh category, you can see a bunch of information about triangles and so on. So you can see how many total triangles are in view, or being rendered right now, and if you look at batched, unsorted sections, that tells you how many of these extra, overhead steps are occurring at the moment. And when you're done with stat render, you can type stat space none to turn off the gobbledygook. So there's also a link here with a whole lot more detail on this whole thing about mesh rendering and sections. All right, another important concept, I probably should have this earlier in the presentation actually, is thinking about overdraw. So that's how often is a single pixel in your point of view, how often does it have to be drawn to produce the end pixel that you're seeing? An overdraw comes from, if you have a collection of static meshes one after another in front of you, like in a line, right? Let's say we're talking about that line of pillars again. If I'm standing in front of a line of pillars and there's 5